Fantasy hockey, it's always a grind, and that's why you're tapped into your daily source for fantasy hockey news, the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast, league-wide fantasy breakdown. We're rolling into the Philadelphia Flyers and all of their top targets. Let's get this paper.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
It might only be July, but ooh, baby, we can't wait for October. What's going on, everybody, and welcome back inside the lab to the latest episode of your daily source for fantasy hockey news, the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. Steal and flip, holding it down Monday through Friday. You guys know what it is. Massive shout out. Thank you so much to the everydayers making us your first listen every single day. We see you and we appreciate you. Make sure you smash that 5-star review. Drop us a subscribe, and thank you so much for listening to us Monday through Friday. Steele, I'm hyped up for today's episode. We're continuing all of our coverage of every single team in the NHL and their top targets. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a booster bonus daily. That's right, something for everyone every day all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Steele, I don't know about you, but I think we roll into Philadelphia here. Yes, I'm excited. I'm intrigued. As always, there's some names here that I think actually you and I have covered a little bit. Some not so much. But this list is one of those teams that perhaps after one, I was going to say maybe two, if that, the list is in flux. And I'm really intrigued to hear what you have to say about the names on this Philadelphia squad. I know you're hot under the collar for Mr. Tortorella. This team looked like a playoff squad for most of the season. They really dropped off down the stretch. They went from being a very disciplined club to a sloppy one. I want your take on what you think for this Philly club. You and I have talked at length about the Eastern Conference, the Metro being so tight. Teams, good ones, are going to be left on the outside looking in. Is Philly one of those in your opinion? Number one, what do you think they're going to land at? I know it's early. I want your opinion. And who are you looking at for our top 5 list? Because I think at least I can say about this team, there might be 4 or 5 breakout candidates. That's how uncertain I am about this team, but over to you, my friend. I'm hoping you're going to bring some clarity to the situation for me.
Not much clarity on this team right now. And look, this was a team that held on to a top 3 spot in the Metropolitan Division for almost half the season last year. And like you said, just dwindled down very, very slowly into missing the playoffs at the end of the regular season. There are a lot of young players on this team still. Morgan Schoss, Matt Vey, Mitch Kov coming into the mix as well. Joel Farabee still 23 years old, 24 years old. Owen Tippett, 24 years old. There's a lot of young Tyson Forster, Bobby Brink, who we talked a little bit about last year. So there's a lot of young talent on this team. Fantasy-wise, there's not much to love besides really the top 2 players that we're going to be talking about. But we're going to give the top 5
for a couple of other guys. But I agree with you for sure.
There's only 2 guys that are really going to be a draftable asset for fantasy team. Feel good about it going into the draft. So, we'll start at number 1, and I think it's actually really close with the number 1 and number 2 position, but I am going to go with Travis Konecny in the number 1 spot right now.
Yes,
I do have Owen Tippett at number 2, but just below him. I actually do think Owen Tippett will be a better hockey player than Travis Konecny.
Different
players. Yeah, of course. I'm not talking about what they bring to the game right now, but when we talk about overall, overall skill and what they do and what they bring to this organization, I think Owen Tippett, you give him one more year, he's going to be the better hockey player over Travis Konecny. But fantasy-wise, I will go with Travis Konecny at number 1. He's just getting into his prime right now. Had a really good season, career high season, 68 points in 76 games. He's a bit of a banger league beauty, 67 penalty minutes. He also had 90 hits with 32 blocks. You got to like what he does on the special teams. I know the Philadelphia Flyers have a really, 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 really bad power play, but on special teams, on the penalty kill, he had 6 shorthanded goals last year and 1 shorthanded assist. So he's got that dual eligibility on the special teams. If they can somehow get their power play working even close to 20% this upcoming season, his power play points are going to go up. His overall point total is going to go up in the right direction as well.
Uh-huh.
That's why I have Travis Konecny at number 1, because he does both penalty kill and power play, and he led the team with 68 points last season. So he is their number 1 guy, but I believe Owen Tippett is right there behind him, if not right there beside him.
Let's talk about Tippett in a hot minute, because I think you've heard from me, at least over as much as you've been saying Savant. I think I've been saying I don't want to tip my hand and mention too early some of the players I'm really going after. Travis Konecny is a player that I've been spoken about on this show, but I really, really like. And that's for obvious reasons. Take a look at this little number for you, Steele. He's only 26 years old, 8 seasons in the NHL. He has 26 game-winning goals. Not only is the fantasy value there and the categories, you mentioned it, he's a chippy player, but he can get it done at both ends of the ice. Very versatile. The word that comes to mind when you think about Travis Konecny is versatile, and he is a perfect middle of your draft, even to the high end of the draft, considering my opinion on him. I'm comfortable with him, I would say, for me, 6th, 7th round, maybe a little bit later, depending on the format, 8th round. I don't want to let him slip. So maybe I'm buying into him a little bit more. I love his game steal. I love what he can do at both ends of the ice. He is one of those players that I fall in love with because of what he does for his team in terms of the win category and my fantasy squad. To your point on Owen Tippett, and just up and down, Steele, that power play, let me just get this off the chest, 12%?
Yeah.
I had to double check.
It's not good.
The Columbus Blue Jackets had it at 15%. And that's awful. And they were 3 full percentage points better. I can't help but feel, and maybe this is the most boneheaded, obvious take you could say, it's not going to be that bad next year. So this Philadelphia team with all those young pieces, I think one more year under Torts, say what you will about him, I think this team doesn't fall off as much as it does next year and is much peskier and much more offensively talented than they were last year, right into the same vein as Owen Tippett. I'm going to stop talking. 28 goals, 25 assists, 53 points. This is what I think about when I think about Owen Tippett. He's a shooter, 289 shots on net, and I'm thinking after the confident kind of quote-unquote breakout-like season for him, which was, 53 points, 28 goals, the best he's had, I can't help but feel he's a 300-plus shot kind of guy. He can shoot the biscuit, little bit of a late bloomer here, Steele, but he's worth the price of admission, and if you're buying into it like you and I are, I'm liking him on my fantasy team just as much as Travis Konecny, like you said.
I don't even know if I would call him a late bloomer. He just didn't get enough opportunity with the Florida Panthers when he was with them for the first 3 seasons. He's 24 years old. He wasn't getting opportunity like you would like to have him get. I mean, he was getting 11 and a half, 12 and a half minutes of average ice time in the bottom 6 group with the Florida Panthers. Now he gets into Philadelphia with a little bit of a younger team right now. He gets into the top 6. And over the last 2 seasons, his average time on ice has gone up to 17 and a half and 16 and a half last year. Still waiting for a full season for Owen Tippett, but that's why I have him right there behind Travis Konecny right now. He's a few years younger than him. He has a 49-point season and backs it up with a career-high 53-point season in 78 games. He went from minus 17 to a minus 5 last year, so his overall game defensively at both ends of the ice has been a lot better as well. And I would like to call him a banger league beauty, but he only gets 12 minutes. He only had 12 minutes, penalty minutes last season. So not much of a banger league beauty, but he does like to throw the body around. Back-to-back seasons of 125 plus hits. He had 148 last year. And like you said, this guy can get up to 300 plus shots.
Yeah,
so
you like that with those scoring numbers.
I love the peripherals. I really do see him being a 30-plus goal scorer next season. Hopefully he plays the full 82 games, but 30-plus goals with 60, 65 points being the high end of what Owen Tippett can do. Again, especially if the power play can get going and he is on that first power play unit. I really do like what Owen Tippett brings to the game right now at such a young age. He throws his body around, like I said, and a lot of it has to do if he can get more deployment and get some more ice time, but also, again, the special teams. The power play needs to be better than 12% going into next season. It has to be very consistent. So Owen Tippett, he's right there behind Travis Konecny at number 2.
Fantasy-wise is one thing. I think we're going to put a finger on how we feel about this team. How they're going to fare in the standing steel and on the ice, considering, the Matvei Michkovs of the world, the Fedotovs in the net of the world, and all of these young players. This is an enigma of a team if there is one in the NHL this year.
Yeah.
So let's talk a lot more about it after the break. After this deal, I think you and I's lists have been very close. I don't know if they're going to be close after the break, but let's get there. This episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. Steele and I love sports. We don't want them to ever stop. That's how much we love them. But now that the playoffs and all the major leagues are well done, FanDuel is trying to hook you up on what is left. And all summer long, FanDuel is getting all customers a booster bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. Steele, I don't know about you. I've been betting on the PGA, CFL, MLB, a little bit of everything. FanDuel got you covered all summer long. That's FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball.
And thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Continue to hit the subscribe button, the follow button, leave a 5-star review, and make sure you go over to the YouTube channel of Locked On Sports Today, the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. They are here for you 24/7, bringing you the top sports stories of the day with can't miss analysis, opinions, and news. You can also find it on the free Amazon Fire TV channel app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Flip, getting past the number 2 spots on this Philadelphia Flyers team for top. Buckle up indeed, because Travis Konecny and Owen Tippett were guaranteed the number 1.
I might put you on this list, Steele.
I might have to be on this list.
You're coming in at 5.
I don't know if I want to play for John Tortorella, though. So maybe leave myself off the list. Yeah, we'll take that back. But look, when we get to number 3, number 4, number 5 on this list, it's going to be tough because even at that point, you don't even know if you want to draft these players. I do have a number 3. I'm going off the board.
Whoa.
I think I'm going with Matvei Michkov at number 3.
Okay.
I'm going with Michkov at number 3.
This is risky.
It is risky business.
I don't disagree with you. Do you want me to say that early?
Look, I mean, it's fine. I mean, I'm fine if you do. I'm glad you don't, but
I don't.
Look, there's a few options you could go with ahead of Michkov. You could go with Joel Farabee. You could go with maybe Sean Couturier. You could maybe go with Travis Sanheim if you want a defenseman. Maybe you go after one of the goaltenders in Fedotov or Urson at number 3 off for number 3 off the board in the draft. But who am I forgetting? Who would you take at number 3 if it's not Michkov?
So let's smash this all together then, Steele, because I actually do think this is probably indicative of what you need to do with these Philadelphia Flyers players. After those first 2 that you and I spoke about, be very wary of what you're doing. However, let's start with Michkov, because I've been doing a lot of reading about this player, and he's explosive, Steele. Obviously, all those concerns about his contractual eligibility and his ties to the Russian KHL, similar to Fedotov, just Fedotov's was way crazier and involved the army and service and all that. Now that he is officially, I think yesterday, arrived in Philly, this is a player that all that I'm reading about and watching, he's already ready to blow the doors off of NHL defensemen. So I'm here for your take on terms of his attractiveness as a sexy little under the radar fantasy piece, and in Keeper Dynasty, I got to get at least one of those plugs in per episode. I agree with you actually tenfold. So if those people are out there and you got to look at Matvei Michkov in those Keeper Dynasty leagues, Steele is bang on the money. However, he would fall further down my list only because I'm looking at younger players who are already in the NHL doing their thing. And look, I've got 3 players that I'm going to go off right now. Morgan Frost and Cameron York are, if you look into their numbers, Cam York, he goes by now, I guess. I've been watching these kids steal for a while. And Morgan Frost has been on my list. In Sault Ste. Marie in back-to-back years, he put up over 200 points. I know he's, speaking of late bloomers, he's coming into 25. Morgan Frost for me is on the list. I don't know how to rank these guys, and I'm glad we're kind of breaking up the episode like this because I do want to talk about the goaltending after the break. So I'm going to throw Morgan Frost's name into the hat, and let me say Cameron York, 10 goals, 20 assists last year, 44 penalty minutes, over 22 minutes of ice time per night. He's already earned Tortorella's trust. So I wanted to sell you on this guy, and maybe once again I'm tipping my hand because here we go. How about 174 block shot steal for a 23-year-old kid? 76 hits, 44 penalty minutes, and 30 points, and he's just getting comfortable. Cam York, I just gave it away once again, is one of my sneaky under-the-radar players, and I think he deserves to be on this list, although I understand the angles that you're taking with yours.
Yeah, 100%. Look, there's lots of options. I mean, once you get past
It's just
Travis
tough,
Konecny,
man. All these guys are similar in terms of value, I think.
yeah, once you get past Travis Konecny and Owen Tippett, Travis Konecny, like you said, he's probably going somewhere in the 6th, maybe 7th round. Owen Tippett, I could see him getting taken in the 9th or 10th. Once you get past that, you're pretty much taking flyers anywhere over 15th and onward in the draft. So there's really not a ton to love about this team fantasy-wise. I'm going to go with Michkov and take a shot in the dark as he will be the third flyer off the board. He had a really good season in the KHL last year with Sochi. 19 goals, 41 points in 47 games, had 45 penalty minutes. He seems like he could be a Banger League beauty if he's a physical guy. So I'm gonna go with Michkov at number 3 off the board for the Philadelphia Flyers. That's who I would be targeting. At number 4, honestly, I'm going with Travis Sanheim over Cam York right now. It really does depend if York is on that top power play unit. Again, these are all projected on Daily Faceoff. It does say York is going to be quarterbacking that number 1 unit in Philadelphia. But, I mean, they've got a lot of options. They've got Travis Sanheim. They've got Cam York. They have Jamie Drysdale, who could be potential on that top power play unit as well as a right shot defenseman. So I like Travis Sanheim just for what you said about Cam York. He had a really good season last year, 44 points in 81 games. Just alongside the peripherals, he had 149 blocks, 94 hits, 146 shots. So the peripherals are pretty decent. He has more points than Cam York right now, but I could see Cam York.
Stop picking on Cam York, Steele.
I'm not picking on him. I'm just saying Travis Sanheim, he's going to be number 4 off the board for me. But again, it's really a pick and choose him. And at that point, you really don't care which player, because they all kind of fall into the same tier, the same round of the draft.
At the end of what the season transpired for this Philadelphia Flyers club, this is one of those situations that most of these names, except for those top 2, are going to be there for you if you want to take the risk, if your team is shaping out to the situation where a Joel Farabee, Travis Sanheim fits the mold later in the draft, because those players, given how the Philadelphia Flyers really tanked over the last, let's say, 3 or 4 weeks for sure, you're going to be able to get those guys at a pretty good price. And I think, Steele, they're definitely good enough, depending on that goaltending, and I want to talk about that right after the break, to be right in the mix once again. Like you said, they held down that 3rd spot in the Metro for most of the season, but they went from being a very disciplined club. I know they took very little penalties to being one of the most penalized clubs in the NHL. So anyway, let's talk about some potential breakouts, some really under-the-radar names, a lot of young guys on this team, Steele. Tyson Forster, Bobby Brink, perhaps. Let's talk about it and the goaltending right after the break.
Right after the break, we'll get to our number 5 position off the board as well. We'll talk about the goaltenders, so much more coming up on the Locked On Fantasy Hockey podcast with so many more teams to break down. We still got lots in both in both conferences. So you got to keep tuned, keep your eyes peeled for the Locked On Fantasy Hockey podcast episodes, Monday through Friday, all coming up after the break. And thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey podcast your first listen every single day. Continue to hit the subscribe button, the follow button, leave a 5-star review. We appreciate that love and support you show us Monday through Friday. 7 o'clock in the morning is when you can find our episodes. So just to reel everything back.
Reel me in, Steele. Reel me in.
Travis. So we both agree Travis Konecny is the number 1 guy off the board. Owen Tippett's number 2. I think we can both agree. You said we're fine with Michkov off the board in that number
Sure.
3 position. There are a few other options you can go with, but we're both going to take a shot in the dark here and put some high risk, high
In
reward
terms
option.
of intrigue and in terms of at least if this was a keeper dynasty, I'm fine with it 100%. It's
high
risky
risk, high
though,
reward,
and I
for
think
sure.
we can both admit that.
Yeah, it is risky. High risk, high reward with this player, but that's why you were putting him at number 3. Who did you say comes in at number 4?
For me, it's Cam York. And if we want to go Cam York, Travis Sanheim, I understand what you're bringing to the table with him. And actually, to start the year, again, along with the Flyers, he was really solid. He was putting up really good nights as a D-man, and he was one of those targets. Actually, I think, I had him for a lot of the season last year in our listener league. So I just really like Cam York. So if we can agree on going for a Philly D-man, Cam York, Travis Sanheim, one of those two guys comes in at 4.
Yeah, they'll come in at number 4, either of those defensemen. At number 5, this is where it gets tricky. Yeah. I mean, you could go with Morgan Frost. Again, another guy taking a shot in the dark, gets under 60 minutes of average ice time, 41 points in 71 games last year. The peripherals there's a lot to be desired with this guy.
I mean, that player Steele, in my opinion.
I like the player as well, but it's really a consistency thing for me with him. He's really, really streaky. And when he gets cold, he is ice cold. So it's not great to have on your fantasy team. Hey, that actually makes sense. The last name plays into it. So
no, that's my bad.
Honestly, I don't know who the starting goaltender is going to be. I mean, we could put Joel Farabee at number 5, but I'm going to go with a goaltender at number 5 off the board.
Yes, sir. Me too.
Ivan Fedotov or Samuel Ersson, either one, whoever is going to be that starting number 1 guy.
Yeah.
I like that as being a third string goaltender for your team.
I like that angle as well, Steele. We're trying to really bring up some of these situations, especially if you're a first or second or third year GM. Look, hockey and fantasy hockey is for everybody. Jump in, get your toes wet, and make sure you're tapped into the pod. But if you are able to snag, what was the team we were talking about yesterday, Steele? What were we talking about? Because the goaltending situation was very similar.
The Red Wings?
Anyway,
Fedotov. Red Wings episode?
Samuel Ersson. No, it was the one. It wasn't that. LA Kings. There we go.
Yes, LA
Darcy
Kings.
Kemper, Fedotov. These teams that we think are going to be definitely in the mix or a playoff squad, but they don't have a name that screams off the page and doesn't get that attention of having to take in those rounds. You can maybe score on some of these squads that aren't the bottom feeders, right? But they're not the top. And I think Fedotov, maybe even Samuel Ersson Steele at times last year, he was a valuable goaltender, 23-19 and 7, 4 shutouts, only 24 years old. John Tortorella, as much as Fedotov kind of came in and they gave him those 3 games or whatever it was, he allowed 10 goals. I actually think they want it to be Samuel Ersson with Fedotov backing him up. Both of them offer a lot of intrigue. So I love and I agree wholeheartedly. Number 5 has to be one of those goaltenders because they're going to be a better team. And they already proved that they can hang with most of the best teams in the East. But let me just ream off a couple of names because Tyson Forster, Bobby Brink, even Nick Seeler on week to week for banger leagues. Look at his peripherals. They're insane. Like if you need here, let me bring them up. 205 blocks, 132 hits, 78 penalty minutes. If you're in a banger league, Nick Seeler is a name you write down for those week-to-week fill-ins. Tyson Forster and Bobby Brink, those Steele. I'm looking at them as maybe one of those names. And, I like to say this, my last guy off the board, I don't hate taking a guy like especially Tyson Forster, who last year, I believe, popped a 20 piece. I'm really struggling with my statistics here. There it is, 20 goals for a very young player. So I'm looking at some of those names as well as perhaps your last name off the board that I think offers a lot of intrigue. I'm going to stop talking now.
Tyson Forster and Morgan Frost would be coming in at number 6 for me. Those would be the guy. I mean, Joel Farabee as well. After the goaltenders at number 5.
Gets pretty murky after that.
It gets murky. These are guys that you last option. Like if you've got nobody else to take, you've got 2 spots left. Maybe you're going with one of these guys, but I don't have a lot of confidence in this team. I don't have a lot of confidence in those those
Do
last
you think
couple
they make
players
the
that we just
playoffs?
mentioned, I don't think they make the playoffs. I really don't. I mean, you look at the Metropolitan. I mean, I said this a couple of weeks ago. I believe there's going to be 5 Atlantic teams making the postseason.
And I
Especially with
think
the way
Washington makes the postseason too after what they've done. So there's really not a lot
and
of room in there.
there's no room in my opinion. I mean, I see 5, but I could see Washington being another bubble team or wild card team again. I still believe the New York Islanders are going to be a playoff team this upcoming season. I believe the New York Rangers will finish first in the Metropolitan, even with all the losses
Flyers are gonna
Carolina
be in
had as
tough.
well this offseason. Carolina is still going to be a deadly force to be reckoned with.
I'm
Even
worried
after
about the Hurricanes, but let's
look,
talk about that in another episode.
yeah, we'll talk about that in another episode, but I still think they're going to be a playoff team. So when you look at the Florida Panthers, Boston Bruins, Toronto
So
Maple
many
Leafs,
good teams.
Tampa Bay Lightning, Ottawa Senators,
Crazy.
Detroit Red Wings, and then
Yeah.
you go in, then now you have to go into the Metro with the New York Rangers, the New Jersey Devils getting a ton better, the Carolina
Whoa.
Hurricanes still,
It's
New
going to
York
be a
Islanders,
bloodbath.
Capitals making tons of trades this offseason to improve their roster. It's
Steele,
going to be
take
a
it easy.
bloodbath.
My heart can't take all
I'm getting into it. I'm getting into it. We're getting fired up here. So to answer your question, no, I do not see the Philadelphia Flyers making the postseason next year.
All I have to say is, as I drop my pen, let's just end right there, because be wary of what you do with these Flyers, especially after I just had a little insight from my boy, Mr. Roden over here. That means this Flyers team, even though there are good signs, and I don't think it's like a punching bag of the conference anymore by any means, where it was for a couple of years there, that's just a lot of very young players, and especially in the crease. At least the Toronto Maple Leafs have Anthony Stolarz. Hey-oh, that's how we're going to end this one. We'll talk about the Leafs, though, Steele. Maybe tomorrow's episode, we'll talk about it.
We'll talk about them very, very soon. So many more teams to continue talking and digging into with the top 5 fantasy targets for each team moving forward this offseason. Thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Go check out the Locked On Sports Today YouTube channel. You can also find them on the free Amazon Fire TV channel app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Have a great day out there. Good luck with your bets this summer, and we shall see you back here again tomorrow.
Peace.